Walt Whitman was born on May 31st, 1819, in West Hills, Long Island, New York. He was the second son of Walter Whitman, a house builder, and Louisa Van Velsor. The family consisted of 9 children. Growing up, Walt Whitman attended the highly inadequate school system of Brooklyn, New York, for 6 years of his life. By 1830, at the age of 12, his formal education was over, and for the next 5 years, he learned the printing trade. For about 5 years, beginning in 1836, he taught in a school on Long Island. Whitman was a self-taught reader who became acquainted with the works of Homer, Dante, Shakespeare, and the Bible. Other occupations in the early part of his life included being a schoolteacher, a reporter, and an editor. Walt Whitman received minor recognition for his work during his life. Despite the lack of awards and popularity prior to his death, he started to gain fame for his poetry in the 20th century after he passed away in 1892. However, several decades after Whitman's death, a prize was established in honor of his work in poetry. In 1975, the Walt Whitman Award was created for young poets. An individual with excellency in poetry wins the award for their scholarly work. Along with the award, the winner receives $5,000, a 6-week enrollment at an art school in Italy, and they gain recognition from poets worldwide. Walt Whitman had many influences in his life, the first being Ralph Waldo Emerson. Emerson led the Transcendentalist movement in the 19th century and played a large role in Whitman's book, Leaves of Grass. Whitman was a very independent man and is widely considered to be a Transcendentalist, just like Emerson. With that in mind, the two share similar philosophies, and in the end, Emerson influenced the poems of Whitman with emphasis on spirituality and preserving the originality of objects. In addition, the Civil War was a major influence on Walt Whitman's work. Before Whitman joined the fight against the Confederacy, he went to Washington to find his wounded brother at a military hospital after hearing he was injured. As he saw many horrifying things at these hospitals, such as amputated limbs and dead soldiers, he felt it was necessary to join the fight. He worked as a hospital nurse, and later he wrote poetry that related to the horrible things he saw. He held sympathy for the intense suffering soldiers went through, and brought out the sadness and destruction of war in his poetry, including O Captain, My Captain. Another influence in the works of Walt Whitman was the Christian Bible, as Whitman commonly follows the poetic strategies the well-known book of Christianity used. He was attracted to its rhythmic pace and long cadences that separated him from many other poets of the 19th century. Finally, the Italian opera served as a strong influence in Whitman's works. Whitman grew interest in Italian performers, admired the works of its many talented artists, and attended shows regularly. They even influenced Leaves of Grass, as Whitman includes many musical terms and incorporates musicians and composers in his collection of poetry. He praised these men for helping his poetry in a prominent way.
The first poem we're going to look at is O Captain, My Captain. O Captain, my Captain, our fearful trip is done. The ship has weathered every rack. The prize we sought is won. The port is near. The bells I hear. The people all exulting. While follow eyes the steady keel, the vessel grim and daring. But oh heart, 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 oh the bleeding drops of red, where on the deck my captain lies fallen cold and dead. O Captain, my Captain, rise up and hear the bells. Rise up, for you the flag is flung. For you the bugle trills. For you bouquets and ribbon wreaths. For you the shores a crowding. For you they call, the swaying mast, their eager faces turning. Here, Captain, dear father, this arm beneath your head. It is some dream that on the deck you fallen cold and dead. My captain does not answer. His lips are pale and still. My father does not feel my arm. He has no pulse, nor will. The ship is anchored safe and sound, its voyage closed and done. From fearful trip the victor ship comes in with object won. Exult, O shores, and ring, O bells, but I, with silent tread, walk the spot my captain lies, fallen cold and dead. The poem is told from a point of view of a sailor on a ship. The sailor is praising his captain for guiding the vessel through a terrible, dangerous voyage that was overall successful. On shore, spectators celebrate the ship's return from the trip. However, the sailor finds his captain dead on the deck of the boat. While the celebration continues on the land, the man at sea mourns the loss of his leader. While on the surface, the poem appears to be about a saddened sailor, it truly refers to the assassination and passing of Abraham Lincoln following the American Civil War. The captain represents Abraham Lincoln, who guided the divided nation through the uncertain times of war. While the nation had emerged from the terrible war, uncertainty plagued the future. The loss of a strong leader due to an untimely shooting brought sadness over the nation in a time when the country needed Lincoln most. Walt Whitman, often called the father of the free verse, breaks his habits with his poem and follows an AABB pattern. His use of a more standard format demonstrates the mournful tone of the time, as well as the formal marching of soldiers during the wartime. Whitman uses the entire poem to serve as an extended metaphor to celebrate and mourn for the passing of Abraham Lincoln. Throughout the duration of the poem, Whitman compares Lincoln to a captain, the Civil War to the voyage, and the United States to a ship. The captain has persevered through tough times but has returned home successful. Much like Lincoln during the war, the long, fearful voyage is much like the Civil War, one of the bloodiest times in American history. The ship serves as a portrayal of America, through which it has traveled turbulent waters but ultimately made it back to safety at the harbor. This poem has great amounts of imagery, making the scenes of the victorious homecoming and devastating death feel as if they are happening right in front of the audience. These words heighten the emotional influence of the poem. Whitman creates a picture describing how the bugle trills and the people are swaying and exulting, and the audience can nearly see the bleeding drop of red and the captain's lips pale and still. One major theme in the poem is that success often requires sacrifice. In the poem, the sailors accomplish a great task by safely returning the ship back through a challenging journey. However, the triumphant moment is overshadowed by the death of the captain. Through the use of his extended metaphor, Whitman uses the end of the Civil War and the upcoming reunification of the Union as a victorious moment for America. However, despite the euphoric feelings regarding the close of the war among many, the assassination of Abraham Lincoln represented one of the many sacrifices that was required in order to bring back success. In addition, the hundreds of thousands of soldiers whose lives were lost, families that were torn apart, the relationships that were ruined by the war all served as sacrifices that would eventually bring about peace. Whitman uses this theme to warn the audience about hastily attempting to conquer large goals without being prepared to make many sacrifices. This theme is something that Whitman experienced on a personal level and wished to portray to others. Whitman had always opposed the expansion of slavery and therefore opposed the ideals of many Southerners, and he became caught up in the war after his brother was injured in the fighting. Following the war, Whitman was deeply saddened with Lincoln's assassination. One of America's greatest leaders passed at a time when the nation needed him most, and Whitman felt lost without him. He translated these feelings into a poem to emphasize that there were tragedies to go with the victory.
O Me, O Life was published as a poem in Walt Whitman's famous book Leaves of Grass in 1891. He published his collection of poetry after the Civil War, and because of this, he added some events that relate to his experiences at war. In this poem, Whitman questions the value his life holds now that the Civil War is over. In a world where industrialization and more technology arises, Waltman feels out of his place and somewhat uncomfortable. After serving the war and seeing the destruction it caused, he wrote this poem. O Me, O Life is a free verse poem that has two parts. The first part is about the question relating to the value of life, and the second part about being the answer. Whitman talked about reality and how the world and the people on it would be affected in the future. O Me, O Life by Walt Whitman. O me, O life, of the questions of these recurring, of the endless trains of the faithless, of cities filled with the foolish, of myself forever reproaching myself, for who more foolish than I, and who more faithless, of eyes that vainly cave the light, of the objects mean, of the struggle ever renewed, of the poor results of all, of the plotting and sordid crowds I see around me, of the empty and useless years of the rest, with the rest me intertwined. The question, O me, so sad recurring, what good amid these, O me, O life? Answer, that you are here, that life exists, and identity, that the power play goes on, and you may contribute a verse. In this poem, Whitman feels the people in the society are unintelligent and do not know how to make America improve. Unlike O Captain, My Captain, O Me, O Life emphasizes the value of life and the reason people live. O Me, O Life is very interesting as it can connect to anyone. Anyone can read the poem and feel like Whitman is talking to them and the value of their life. Before we get involved with the analysis of the poem, we have to understand the person that Whitman was. One person that influenced the work of Whitman was the transcendentalist Ralph Waldo Emerson. A transcendentalist values nature and the innocence of objects. They feel the best form of things come as they enter the earth. Industrialization goes against their morals as it fails to keep the earth pure. Whitman is identified as a transcendentalist and feels it is unnecessary to industrialize. In the poem, he incorporates transcendentalist ideas as he uses foolish and faithless to describe the people. In the beginning of the 20th century, industrialization was the next big thing, and the people of America supported this change that would sacrifice many aspects of nature. In the poem, Whitman says, of the endless trains of faithless, of cities filled with the foolish. Urbanization and the use of railroads fueled and represented industrialization, and they go against most, if not all, practices of transcendentalism. In the first stanza, Whitman possesses a hopeless and discouraging tone as he describes himself and the people of America as faithless and foolish. He refers to the people by saying, of cities filled with foolish. He believes the people have no sense or idea to make a positive impact in the community. He questions his value and purpose on earth and does not feel motivated or inspired to keep living. With all the industrialization and change going on, Whitman has no drive in the world that he lives in. In the second stanza, the answer, Whitman changes his tone as it becomes more optimistic and positive when he says that you are here, that life exists, and identity. After posing the question about his value of life, he reminds himself about the blessings he has and what he can do with it. He goes on to say, and you may contribute a verse. The tone clearly has changed as he now has a positive and faithful view of, of life. He feels his life is valued and he can have an impact with the qualities he was given at birth. In the first section, Whitman uses personification to further his point. When he says, of eyes that vainly cave the light, he talks about the values people have and what they care about the most. People live their lives and do things for their own good. He feels that they value things that are not important or beneficial to their lives. He uses vainly to explain how people selfishly go on about their lives. People can vainly or selfishly cave the light or selfishly hope to achieve or find value in life. Light can be viewed as a realization or understanding of someone's true meaning, the selfish desire to do things. Whitman includes anaphora in his poem. He consistently uses of to start many lines throughout the poem. His repeated use of the word of ponders the aimlessness of the world. Relating to the tone, anaphora and the use of helps the audience connect to the poem. People can link their lives to the speaker of the story and examine the true value of their life. Whitman closes the poem with a strong metaphor to emphasize his belief about life. He compares society to a powerful play, and then insists that each person can change the world, saying that everyone can contribute a verse. Through the use of his metaphor, Whitman is able to demonstrate his belief in the importance of art and human expression. Whitman utilizes this metaphor to encourage the reader to stay resilient and to change the world. The theme of Oh Me Oh My involves the use of time and to cherish and appreciate the limited time that you have on earth. Whitman talks about the value of life, and at first he is very faithless and filled with despair, but later, in the answer, he describes living life to the fullest. Even during the darkest hour, during the worst times, life goes on and the world keeps turning. There is hope in the most basic assurances. Whitman uses his tone to stress this theme, especially when he uses contradictory tones in the beginning and the end of his work. At the start, his tone is seemingly hopeless, believing life is full of challenges and hardships, but by the end, it is motivated and optimistic, ready to seize the day. This shift in tone emphasizes Whitman's theme about cherishing each and every moment of life. In addition, the metaphors that Whitman uses help to stress his theme. When he compares life to a play and people's influences to them, contributing a verse, he encourages the audience to make the most of their time and to try to put forth their best efforts towards making good. Whitman experienced many hardships throughout his life. Born into a poor family with many kids, he received very little education and entered the workforce at a young age. As he grew older, his works were often rejected by publishing companies, and his book, Leaves of Grass, was met with hard criticisms. One of his brothers was captured by the Confederates during the Civil War, and one of his other brothers died of tuberculosis soon after. After Whitman had a stroke of his own, his mother passed away. Throughout his entire life, Walt Whitman faced obstacles at every turn. However, much like he says in the poem, he stayed strong through the darkest days and took advantage of his time, becoming one of the best known poets of the 19th century. Walt Whitman died in March 26, 1892 in Camden, New Jersey from pleurisy. Pleurisy is a disease of the inflammation of the chest and lungs, and it can be fatal. While at first his works were not accepted and received from the public, Walt Whitman's poetry and Leaves of Grass became prominent literary pieces that would greatly influence American literature. His high-minded ideals on the importance of life in American history exemplify Whitman's resiliency and perspectives of the world. In conclusion, Walt Whitman accomplished a feat that most poets in the 19th century could not achieve. He created life-changing pieces of art that would live on after his death.